Welcome to the latest episode of Gryphon Hall. In the last episode, we discovered that my terrain generation had jumped the rails, and then I went on walkabout to survey the damage and gather resources. I didn't find any dead witches under crash-landed farmhouses, but there was definitely an Oz-like unreality where the old terrain met up with the new. In this episode, I continue with exploration and discovery, but instead of going walkabout in the Overworld, I'm headed to the Nether. Now, I'll set up the portal in the Overworld in its proper and permanent place, and then I'll cross the other side and immediately dig in and establish a toehold there. From that point, I have a number of goals. So I need to establish the foundation of a vertical access shaft at the center of the Nether, and I need to gather a fair amount of quartz. I'll need to find some blaze spawners and establish a relatively safe passage to them, and I need to move the portal in the Nether to a safer and more permanent position. But before I do all of that, let me update the base design to reflect our current state. Now, I dug the central shaft all the way down to Bedrock, and after calling on Fred and Wilma, I lined that shaft with the shell that will eventually house our elevator. That officially means that every level of the hall except the above ground residence levels are now under construction. It's not much, but it's a good start. The module at the center of each level is substantially built up, but it still contains a temporary shelter ladder assembly and not a working elevator. So all of those modules are officially under construction as well. Which brings us to the Nether portal. I like to place my portals on the same level as my metro concourse. This is because the level is really the hub of my worldwide transportation system. If all roads lead to Rome in real life, then in this world all roads lead to my metro concourse. Let's check the plan for the metro concourse. It shows us that the portal will be placed in the first module directly in front of where the elevator opens up. Now, for reference, the elevator shaft opens up to the west. So I'll build out this module and establish a structural template that I'll use throughout the rest of the hall. Historically, I've played only vanilla Minecraft, and my lighting choices were limited. My favorite vanilla light source is the redstone lamp, and if I had my way, they would be all over the place. But glowstone has always been somewhat rare and often very dangerous to harvest, and this has become even more true in recent years after various overhauls of the Nether. So that was never a realistic mass production option. My second favorite vanilla lighting item is the lantern. Now, unfortunately, this uses a fair bit of iron, and I typically need a lot of iron to run minecarts to the metro, even after I raid every abandoned mineshaft I can find for miles and miles. So that was not a realistic mass production option either. And so this is how and why I've typically relied on recessed lighting powered by jack-o'-lanterns hidden in the walls, floor, and ceiling. Jack-o'-lanterns are practically free and can be crafted completely with renewable materials. However, I'm running modded Minecraft now, and so I have access to a wide variety of lighting sources, which I like as much or even more than my preferred vanilla choices, and in most cases I can use materials that are common and readily available. In addition, the spawning rules and requirements have changed, so I no longer have to light up my base like it's on the surface of the sun. The end result is that I can play around a bit to see what I like. So I'll try to avoid the recessed lighting for now, and I'll try to rely on stylized torches, candles, and lanterns. Much of that lighting will be installed on the walls or atop furniture, leaving relatively dark corners and ceilings for atmospheric effect. So with all that said, let's get this show on the road. I'm digging out the module I showed you on the plan. As stated in previous episode, these modules are 11 by 11 by 9, but that includes the ceiling layer, which in turn hides that conduit layer which runs between levels. This will leave 6 blocks of vertically open space. I plan to use arch ceiling so that encroaches on the space a little bit, but there should still be plenty of space for whatever I want to place in the middle of the module, and in this case that would be the Nether portal. Now, when I first started building Nether portals, I very much tried to set them up in a kind of gate room like they have in the Stargate SG-1 television series. This was primarily done because I thought it looked cool and it kept unwanted visitors limited to the gate room. At that time, they were typically zombie pigmen. Now they're zombie piglins. Same difference. However, I'm much more tolerant about them wandering around the base than I used to be. What I am a little concerned about is that I sometimes get a zombie hoglin in the base, and from everything I've read, that should not be a problem if I'm very careful about securing the portal on the other end and keeping out any wandering hoglins. I have some ideas about accomplishing that, but that can wait for later. I mentioned earlier that I plan to use an arch ceiling in here. Now, if I was going to use recessed lighting in the ceiling, I would minimize the arches and go with a much flatter surface. But since I plan to put the lighting on the columns supporting the arches, and the spawning rules only consider the floor, not what's blocks and blocks above it, I have greater flexibility in what I can do with the ceiling. The design I'm using here will now be the basic template for all the underground interior spaces of the base. I'll use a completely different look with a completely different set of materials for the residence levels above ground. I had thought about using deep slate tiles or other very dark blocks for the walls and ceiling, but in general I think things look better when the floor is at least a little darker than those surfaces. And if I use such dark blocks for the walls and ceiling, it would dramatically limit the blocks I could use for the floor and still look good, in my personal opinion. But when it comes to putting in the floor, I thought I might try the deep slate tiles after all. And while I do think they look pretty good, the design is very square and rectangular. And when used across a wide open space like this module, it just comes across as too blocky. And yes, I totally understand the irony in making that statement about anything in Minecraft, but there you have it. So I ultimately decided to stick with the deep slate cobble. I think it works. I hope you agree. Now, in creating the portal itself, I want it to be large and prominent in the space provided. I also want to build a little platform or dais on both sides and all around the portal to kind of facilitate access and to help elevate the portal literally and metaphorically. Taking that first step into a new instance of the Nether is always the hardest because you have no idea what's waiting for you on the other side. And while the Overworld can sometimes be a dangerous and scary place, it's like a petting zoo compared to the Nether at its worst. I once spawned in a portal on a tiny little sliver of netherrack floating 20 or so blocks over a vast lava ocean, with gas floating all around the area and shooting fireballs. Even before I was able to understand where the hell I was already trying to dodge gas fireballs without falling into a sea of liquid hot magma. Now, the only thing that could have made it any worse would have been lava sharks with freaking laser beams. That was not a fun day. It looks like I'm luckier today, but not radically so. At least I don't see or hear any piglins, hoglins, or ghast about. That is, however, a pretty severe drop into the large lava sea. Now that I'm through, though, I have an immediate need to enclose the portal for my protection. Oh, bloody hell. It seems that I spawned on a thin sliver of land that gets a lot thinner as I get closer to the lava sea. I'll get as close as I can, but for me to reach the bedrock at the center of the Nether, I'm going to need a substantial amount of gravel, and I'm using what little I have here. Luckily, a key bit of this build is the create mod, and it allows me to grind cobblestone into gravel, and I can do that with just a simple millstone or two even at this early stage of the game. But I'll probably need to craft at least two because they take a while to process anything. Now it looks like I'll need to travel back home to make a mountain of gravel then. Everything on this level is still temporary, so I threw together a little contraption right here. I built a water wheel and set it up to run 2 millstones. I set up one of the millstones and then spent some time harvesting resources for my fields and groves. Now I'm setting up a second millstone to accelerate the gravel production, and then I'm going to take what we have so far to enable me to work my way down to bedrock in the Nether. And then I'll use the gravel to displace lava in a large enough footprint to allow me to start building a central access shaft similar to the one that I've built in the Overworld. Now that I'm back on this side, I need to take the opportunity to completely enclose the portal. In looking around, I think that I might be in a very rare biome where ghasts don't live, or at least they pop in only rarely. However, I don't want to take any chances at this point, so I'll box in my direct link to home before I go on this crazy mission to hold back the lava sea long enough for me to get under it. Gravel's some amazing, incredibly useful stuff in Minecraft. If used wisely, it'll save your bacon as it's doing for me here. Use it indifferently and its value is somewhat diminished. If you use it stupidly, it will probably kill you directly or indirectly. Now I'm using it here to make the most narrow straight down staircase you can make in the game. Unfortunately, this requires me to be standing on blocks that will be directly over my head as I continue to dig down. And unfortunately, gravel blocks are among the few blocks that pay zero respect to gravity. So I'll need to replace gravel blocks with cobblestone or some other gravity-defying block in those places where I need to walk back up or back down. Just like in the Overworld, you can only dig so far in the Nether before you hit bedrock, and I'm there. Now I still have a few things left on my nether to-do list, including finding a blaze spawner or two, establishing a permanent position at the center of the nether, and to move our portal on this side to this presumably more secure position. Now a quick glance at the mini-map also shows that there are structures or tunnels at this depth, and they're pretty close by. So I think I will tunnel to and into one of these and see if we can find and secure a blaze spawner. As I tunnel my way forward, I use a special digging technique while tunneling through netherrack. Since lava and water will always choose to flow to the lowest elevation, I try to remember to dig little holes in the floor ahead of me so that any rush of lava will go into the hole instead of chasing me back down the tunnel. And once I work my way down the tunnel a bit, I will then go back and fill in these holes as the immediate danger is passed. Now, if having my portal located over a giant lava sea was bad luck, finding this spawner so easily and conveniently is almost, but not quite enough to make up for it. From this point, it's all about digging in and establishing a more permanent position in the nether. Unfortunately, that will take some engineering and some technical skills, which will slow things down a bit, but unless I get some crazy mob spawn in the middle of the process, it should be pretty straightforward. Finding the center point's easy. However, building a vertical access shaft back up from this point is going to be a pain in the butt with thousands of cubic meters of liquid hot magma sitting over my head. However, I knew the job was dangerous when I took it. Before I start this next step, I needed to stock up on gravel. And even though I have 2 millstones chugging away on gravel production, they're slow, and of course they aren't doing diddly squat while I'm here in the nether. So I returned to the overworld to do some resource harvesting while the gravel piled up. Now I was able to finally start harvesting cabbages, which I have combined with the cooked chicken, carrots, and bread to make this chicken sandwiches I told you about in an earlier episode. I don't have a full stack yet, but I have enough to last through probably the rest of this episode and maybe a bit beyond. Now that I'm back at the surface, or at least at the liquid hot magma sea level, I can use the gravel I have on me to work my way towards the center point at this elevation. Now I'm still paranoid about beasties that may pop up, and fighting on gravel over liquid hot magma is problematic. Stupid even. So I'm using the gravel to fill to the surface and then adding a block of cobblestone to drastically reduce the chance of somebody removing the block I'm standing on and preventing me from taking a lava bath. I'll place a block of netherrack at the center point, and then I'll continue to expand my lava displacement until I've protected enough space for the center shaft, plus one more layer of blocks to keep the lava off me while I work on the outer layer of the shell. Now I've just completed lava displacement for the vertical shaft itself and one additional outer layer to form a protective wall. At this point I'm now building the beginning of the vertical shaft almost exactly as I did in the overworld. One key difference though is that I don't plan to implement a comprehensive storage system here, so I'm not going to leave open any space to facilitate the installation of such a system. Now I plan to build a metro concourse and transit system in the nether as an almost exact mirror of the one that's in the overworld. But aside from that, I'm not quite sure what I want to do with the rest of the base. The shaft will extend to the bedrock ceiling, but at this point it'll probably be a tall column with multiple arrow slits to view and fire from, and access points at the various places where the column connects to the land. Now I usually like to build nether fortifications that are somewhat in the shape of a wide pyramid, which allows me to shoot ghasts from the safety of the base, while any experience or loot drops would fall into the relative safety of the roof of one of the lower levels. However, in this nether instance, I've only occasionally heard a ghast and I've not actually seen any, so that design might not be feasible, as it would require a lot of work for nothing. I just have to wait and see how it goes. I've built the vertical shaft up from the bedrock layer to the second level, where I'll eventually build the nether version of our metro concourse. However, for now, all I want to do is build the module that will contain the nether side of our first portal pair. Now, unfortunately, it looks as though I miscalculated. I thought that we were much further under the lava sea, or that the lava sea was more shallow than it really is. But I can see that removing gravel from this stack is bringing lava down from the surface. I'm going to go back to my gravel production, and I want to displace enough lava for the entire module, which is 11 by 11, with another outer row to keep out the liquid hot magma while I work. Of course, while I'm waiting for the millstones to generate enough gravel, I've been spending time working on the homestead. I've been able to establish a firm economic base for handling almost everything that comes next. It will really take off once we get around to automating all of it. Now, unless I put down all that gravel on the wrong side of the access shaft, I think I'm good to go now. I will get a mess of gravel back as I dig this out, but something tells me that I may need most of it again real soon. Now, I've dug out the module that will permanently house our portal back to the overworld. Now, this is just the upper part of the module. It allows me to build the ceiling and supporting structures without having to use a bunch of scaffolding and such. But once that's done, I can then excavate the bottom portion of the room and lay down the proper flooring, and then we can add the portal to the center of the room. The module structure is now complete, but as you can see, I left space in which we'll build a new portal. Now, I'll take apart the current portal and use the material to craft a new one. There are a few reasons why I bother doing this. The first is that the new location is more easily protected and central to where I work. The second is that the overworld and the nether are synced to each other, but the ratio is pretty lopsided. So for every block in the overworld, the nether is shifted 8 blocks. So I want to make sure the portal is more closely aligned with the matching portal in the overworld. And that touches on the final reason. Keeping things lined up in this way makes the math involved a lot easier to track and manage. And after losing a sizable number of brain cells during some embarrassing episodes of my youth, any simplification is very welcome. However, I'll go into all of this in greater detail when we start working on the metro itself. Details about the metro, not my misspent youth. I finished the new portal, and I've installed the proper and permanent lighting and flooring. It's unreasonably complicated to fully prevent spawning in the nether through lighting alone. So I've decided to use nether brick slabs on the floor to keep those pesky critters at bay. Otherwise, I would have to have a light source at almost every other block. Now, I did find a fair bit of quartz during this exercise, so I think I will head back to the overworld and clean up before I say goodbye for now. Now, in this episode, we had quite a run of good and bad luck, but in the end, I was able to accomplish all of my goals. Right? I came to the nether and I established a solid toehold. From there, I was able to dig down to the bedrock layer, and from there, I was able to find a nearby structure of a conveniently located blaze spawner. Then I found the center point of the nether, from which I started to build the vertical access shaft upward. Now, I didn't gather as much quartz as I had hoped to, but I have enough infrastructure in place in the nether that coming back and finding more should not be a problem. And I did find enough to get the workshop up and running. Finally, I moved the portal in the nether to a safer and more permanent position. And in between all of that, I spent some time working in the yard and harvesting homegrown goodies. So all in all, it was a very productive run. Now, the next step will be to find or make a bunch of andesite and excavate the workshop and storage area, and then use the create mod to create a bunch of rotational force, which will power the workshop and maybe some other stuff besides. New prospects and opportunities are opening up all the time as we move through this, and I'm looking forward to exploring each and every one of them in turn. So thank you for joining me in another little spin through the world of Gryphon Hall. Take care and cheers.